"Step back, old man, or you're next." That's what one of them said just before they tased my wife. They aimed their weapons at me next. I didn't yell. I didn't run. I just looked at their commander and said 5 words. "Call General Rohr right now." And that's when the SWAT team froze. If 5 words can stop trained men in their tracks, type respect for those who never stop serving. The neighbors on Oakwood Drive knew Roy Tanner as the man who could fix anything with an engine. His garage doors stood open most weekends, the sounds of tools and classic rock drifting across neatly trimmed lawns. At 68, his hands weren't as steady as they once were, but they still remembered every mechanical puzzle they'd ever solved. Most didn't know about his history, the 27 years of service, the missions without names in countries without acknowledgement, the medals kept in a shoebox rather than displayed on walls. Roy preferred it that way, preferred to be judged by how he fixed carburetors, not how he'd once navigated classified operations that never made the history books. Only Linda knew everything. She'd stayed when the nightmares came, when the scars, both visible and invisible, needed tending. Their 43 years of marriage had weathered deployments, silence, and the slow process of Roy becoming a civilian again. Their modest ranch-style home had become a quiet refuge. Roy volunteered at the VFW on Thursdays, built wheelchair ramps for disabled veterans on Saturdays, and spent Tuesdays at the high school teaching auto shop to kids other teachers had written off. That Wednesday afternoon was unremarkable. Roy was beneath Mrs. Henderson's ancient Buick, changing the oil as a favor. Linda had gone for groceries. Wednesday was senior discount day at Palmer's Market. The September air carried the first hint of autumn. The first indication that something was wrong was the screech of tires. Too aggressive for their peaceful street. Too purposeful. Roy rolled out from under the car just as the first black SUV blocked his driveway. 3 more followed. Then the shouting began. Police. Everyone on the ground now. Men in tactical gear poured from vehicles, weapons raised, faces hidden behind helmets and shields. Roy stood slowly, hands visible, engine grease still staining his fingers. "There's some mistake," he began, but a rifle barrel gestured him into silence. "Down on the ground now," Roy complied. Concrete pressed against his cheek as boots surrounded him. Through the chaos of radios and shouted commands, he heard one officer say, "Secure the house," while another zip-tied his wrists behind his back. That's when Linda's car pulled into the driveway. She stepped out, grocery bags in both arms, confusion blooming across her face. "Roy, what's happening?" 3 officers immediately pivoted, weapons trained on her 65-year-old frame. "Drop the bags, hands where we can see them." Linda froze, the paper bags clutched to her chest. "Please, she's not complying." A younger officer's voice cracked with adrenaline. "Ma'am, final warning." Linda began to lower the bags, but her arthritic hands couldn't move fast enough. Non-compliant subject. The young officer stepped forward, drawing his taser. Roy's voice cut through the chaos. "She's my wife. She's just carrying groceries." A boot pressed harder against his back. "Step back, old man, or you're next." The taser fired. Linda's body convulsed as electricity coursed through her. Grocery bags exploded across the driveway. Eggs shattering, apples rolling beneath tactical boots, milk splashing across concrete. She collapsed like a marionette with cut strings. Roy didn't panic, didn't scream. With trained discipline that decades of civilian life hadn't erased, he focused on the officer with command insignia. "Let me up," he said with quiet authority. The commander hesitated, then nodded. As Roy rose to his feet, still zip-tied, he looked directly into the man's eyes and spoke 5 words that changed everything. "Call General Rohr right now." The SWAT commander blinked, momentary confusion crossing his face. Around them, the tactical team maintained their positions, weapons still trained, radio still crackling with tactical chatter. One of the younger officers scoffed. "That's supposed to scare us, old man. We're executing a warrant for Carlos Mendez, high-level drug trafficking. Save the military name dropping." Roy's expression didn't change. His eyes remained fixed on the commander. "This is 4588 Oakwood Drive. You want 4588 Oakwood Avenue? Different zip code entirely." His voice remained steady despite Linda still lying motionless on the concrete. "Now cut these restraints and call General James Rorick at Central Command." "Sir, I need to attend to my wife," Roy added. "She has a heart condition." The commander hesitated, uncertainty creeping into his professional facade. "Check the address," he ordered one of his team. While they verify, Roy spoke again. "Left inside pocket of my jacket." Look, but don't touch. The commander cautiously approached and reaching into Roy's jacket pocket with gloved hands, he withdrew a worn metallic badge with a black eagle insignia, unmistakable to anyone with military intelligence background. Black protocol clearance, Roy said quietly. The room went still. Even the radio seemed to quiet. One of the tactical team members, older than the others, whispered something to the commander. Sir, that's not just military. That's classified Tier 1 operations. That's rupee. The commander's demeanor shifted immediately. Get the medic over here now, he barked. Cut his restraints. As Roy knelt beside Linda, checking her pulse with practiced fingers. The operation crumbled around him. One officer frantically worked his phone, presumably verifying Roy's identity through database searches. Another radio dispatched to confirm the address discrepancy. You hit the wrong house, Roy stated flatly, helping Linda to a sitting position as the medic arrived. You didn't bother to verify. You escalated without cause and you used excessive force on a senior citizen carrying groceries. Across the street, a neighbor filmed the entire scene from his porch. Later, he would tell reporters he just said 5 words, and the SWAT team lowered their rifles like watching someone flip a switch. The commander approached Preeb, his helmet now removed, revealing a face blanched with realization. Sir, we had intelligence that you had nothing, Roy interrupted, his voice still calm, but carrying an edge that made the officer step back. What you had was adrenaline and authority without accountability. Linda's eyes fluttered open, confusion and pain evident. Roy, I'm here, he assured her, then looked back at the commander. I'm taking my wife inside now. Your team will remain outside. You will call General Rohr immediately. The young officer who had fired the taser stood frozen, the weight of his mistake visibly crushing him as Roy helped Linda to her feet. Another team member quietly collected the scattered groceries, a futile gesture of apology. As they walked slowly toward their front door, the whispers among the tactical team told Roy everything. Database searches had confirmed his identity. His name had appeared on lists they weren't supposed to know existed, lists that made even hardened SWAT officers nervous. They had come expecting to find a drug dealer. Instead, they had tased the wife of a ghost. If respect came before assumptions, maybe no one would have gotten hurt. Common honor. If you believe real heroes don't need to yell. 40 minutes passed inside the Tanner home. Linda rested on the sofa, an ice pack pressed against her chest where the taser barbs had struck. Roy sat beside her, one hand always touching hers, his eyes frequently checking the driveway through parted curtains. The SWAT team remained outside, their earlier bravado deflated. 2 officers had been dispatched to the correct address, only to discover that their target had moved months ago. The command vehicle's radio traffic had shifted from tactical operations to damage control. When the black SUV with military plates pulled up, it did so without sirens or flash, just a deliberate stop behind the police vehicles. The man who emerged wore no uniform, just a charcoal suit that suggested authority without needing insignia. General James Rohr stood a moment, surveying the scene with the practiced eye of someone who had assessed far more dangerous situations. 62 years old with silver hair cut to regulation precision, he moved with purpose toward the house without acknowledging the SWAT commander, who hurried to intercept him. Roy met him at the door. The 2 men stood silently for a moment, decades of shared history speaking in the silence between them. Then, with precise formality, General Rohr raised his hand in a crisp salute. Roy returned it, his first salute in 15 years. They told me you were dead, Rohr said finally. Only professionally, Roy answered. Rohr's gaze moved past him to Linda on the sofa. His jaw tightened visibly when he turned to face the assembled tactical team. The general's voice carried across the front yard without needing to shout. Authority radiated from him like heat. This man, he began gesturing toward Roy, wrote the protocols you just broke. The officer stood motionless. One of them, the older team member who had recognized the significance of Roy's badge, suddenly palled in recognition. Tanner, he whispered. R.J. Tanner, you wrote the Civilian Engagement Handbook, the one we studied in advanced training. Roy nodded once, acknowledgement without pride. Rohr addressed the SWAT commander directly. Now, you didn't detain a suspect today. You humiliated a national asset, a man whose operational experience likely exceeds your entire team's combined. The commander started to speak, but Rohr cut him off. The officer who deployed a taser without proper threat assessment. Where is he? The young officer stepped forward, trembling visibly. Your equipment now. Without protest, the young man removed his tactical vest, sidearm, and badge, placing them on the hood of the nearest vehicle. You're relieved. Report to your captain for administrative reassignment. No one spoke as the officer walked to a patrol car and sat inside, head bowed in the realization that his career had just imploded. Roar turned back to Roy, reaching inside his suit jacket. He withdrew a sealed envelope and extended it. This contains two things, the general explained quietly. A formal apology from the department and reinstatement of your clearances. We need you back, Roy. The world hasn't gotten any safer. Roy looked at the envelope, but made no move to take it. The world never changes, James, he replied. Just the uniforms and the weapons. He glanced back at Linda, who watched from the doorway. Now my service is to her now, and to the people who need car repairs, not tactical solutions. Roar nodded, understanding in his eyes. He placed the envelope on the porch railing. The offer stands, he said simply, then turned to leave. Roy never opened the envelope. Some offers didn't need consideration to be answered. A week later, Police Chief Michael Brennan called a press conference. Standing behind a podium flanked by American flags, he announced what the department was calling the 5 Words Protocol, a new mandatory training program emphasizing de-escalation, proper identification procedures, and respecting the dignity of civilians during all interactions. He never mentioned Roy or Linda by name, didn't have to. The video had gone viral despite attempts to suppress it, and the community knew exactly what had prompted this sudden commitment to reform. Linda recovered slowly. The taser hadn't worsened her heart condition, thankfully, but bruises bloomed across her chest where the barbs had struck. She never spoke of the pain, not the physical kind, nor the deeper injury of being treated as a threat in her own driveway. But something had changed in her posture. She stood taller beside Roy at the grocery store, met the eyes of officers they passed, refused to be diminished by what had happened. Roy continued his routines. Mrs. Henderson's Buick got its oil change. The VFW still saw him on Thursdays. The high school auto shop students still learned that second chances were sometimes hidden beneath engine grease and patient instruction. But the neighborhood noticed the differences. How every patrol car slowed near the Tanner driveway. How officers nodded first when they passed Roy on his morning walks. How an unmarked black SUV appeared occasionally, its driver leaving small packages on the porch. Books, bottles of good whiskey, once a restored photograph of a much younger Roy standing among men whose faces were carefully blurred. 3 months after the incident, a rookie officer's cruiser broke down near the Tanner home. Roy emerged from his garage with tools before the young man had even called for assistance. As they worked together beneath the hood, the officer finally gathered his courage. "Sir," he began hesitantly, "everyone at the academy talks about you now about what happened. They say you could have ended careers that day with one phone call." He paused, hand stilling on the wrench. "Why didn't you?" Roy tightened a bolt before answering. "Because revenge doesn't fix engines," he said simply. "And it doesn't fix people either." The cruiser's engine started on the first try. After that, Roy wiped his hands on a rag and stepped back. "Thank you, sir," the young officer said, respect evident in every syllable. "Roy," he corrected. "Just Roy." Later that week, a reporter cornered him outside the VFW, microphone extended aggressively. "Mr. Tanner, why didn't you fight back when they attacked your wife? You had the training. You had the right. Why just 5 words instead of action?" Roy looked directly into the camera, his expression neither angry nor proud. "Because 5 words were louder than fear," he said. "And sometimes the strongest position isn't the one where you're standing over someone else. It's where you're standing your ground." He walked away, then back to his truck, back to the life he'd chosen after decades of service that would never appear in history books or medal ceremonies. Just a man who fixed things, who understood that some forms of power never needed to raise their voice to be heard, who had learned that true authority often spoke most clearly through mercy rather than might. A man who had once been a weapon who now chose to be a builder instead. Subscribe to Steelheart Stories if you believe some men don't need titles or rank, just 5 words and the truth behind.